everyone, and welcome to day 5 of the 31-day Halloween video hop. I was so excited to be able to participate in this video this year, and I just wanted to say a big thank you to Hook, Line, and Anchor for facilitating this and sponsoring the awesome prize drawing that will take place at the end. Speaking of prizes, be sure to check back every day this month to watch each new video. In order to qualify for the prize drawing at the end, just submit a comment after you've watched each video and your name will be entered for the prize drawing. You must watch and comment on all 31 videos to qualify. Okay, let's get on with the card making. Today I'm making a fun card using my favorite thing stamp and die set called Frightfully Sweet. Whenever I get a new stamp set, I like to start out by stamping up all the images and making a color map using my Copic alcohol markers. Here I'm showing you the one I colored up for this set, which I will save and tuck back into my stamp pocket when I'm done so that I have it to refer back to later on. Today's card is just going to use 3 of these little critters. I'm going to put some spooky music on while I color and you can follow along. Enjoy the coloring and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so that's it for the coloring part. Now I'm going to grab the corresponding dies for this set and I'm going to tape them up with my purple tape and I'm going to run them through my die cutter and they come out great. I love the purple tape because it's just enough tack where it doesn't damage the paper at all. It comes right off but it holds everything in place. So here are the finished pieces and I'm ready to start working on the background. Alright, so for the background, it's actually made up of 4 different layers. We have the top layer, which is a piece of black cardstock for the jungle vine layer. Then I've got a little piece of paper for the moon. I've got the starry sky background, and then I have some just printer paper with some yellow ink on it to add some glow for the stars. And then I just wanted to show you the different dies that I use for this. So that's the MFT Wonky Rectangles die. This is a Memory Box Jungle Vine die. And the last die that I use is by Reverse Confetti. I think it's called Starry Night, and this is a fun die too. So all of those pieces I used to construct the background, and these are the pieces that I've pre-cut. That's just printer paper, so it's nice and thin, and the rest is Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I think the black is maybe 100-pound cardstock, but I'm not sure. I kind of keep all my cardstock together and I don't do a very good job at labeling it, so I never know sometimes. But needless to say, I ran this through the die cutter machine and I did it with 2 dies at once just to save a step. And I have to be really careful in punching out the pieces for this die because it's pretty intricate. So I grab my Tim Holtz paper piercer and I just gently poke through. Everything's cut nice and neat, but you just have to, because there's so many intricate pieces, you have to be real careful so that you don't tear anything. And so that's what I'm doing with that. I'm just taking my time, even though I have it in high speed. I do take my time with this part so that I don't tear anything. And as you can see, this came out perfect, and I'm ready to move on to the next step. I decided to ink up the background using my Distress Oxide inks, and I picked out two colors, Wilted Violet and Blueprint Sketch. And both of these I don't have all the Tim Holtz colors. I wish I did, but I don't. And so I just picked these two because I thought they looked kind of nighttime Halloween-y, and I also threw in some black soot at the end there too, which I'll show you in a second. But so I just got out my ink daubers, and I don't use the blending brushes. I do sometimes, but not for this particular exercise. And I just really randomly laid down some color, and you'll see me go back and forth where I just kind of blend and add more color and blend and add more color until I get to what I like. I'm not trying to achieve perfection by any means here because it's mostly going to be covered up, but I just wanted to have a little bit of interest with kind of a two-tone nighttime color scheme, which I think ended up turning out pretty cool. So I'm just continuing to ink blend. I didn't really need to go all the way down to the bottom of the card, because at the time I didn't realize I was going to be putting grass in, but I later changed my mind and added grass. So I didn't need to ink the bottom up, but I did anyway. And so now what you're seeing me do is add a little bit of the black soot around the frame of the inside of the jungle vine die cut, just to add a little bit of dark sky in here. I'm just lining up the die cut again to see how far in I want to bring the shadow of the black soot ink. And then I blend in again with a couple of the different other colors until I'm happy with it. And I think I lay it down and I'm like, yeah, that looks pretty good. Yep, thumbs up. So I'm ready to move on to the next step. And if you're familiar with oxide inks at all, you'll know that they react well to water. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking some water. This is my dirty paintbrush water from watercoloring, and I just splatter it on the panel of the card until I get enough splatters that I think would be good, and then I just daub them up with a paper towel. And you can see it leaves white splotches behind, which kind of lends itself to a little bit of a Starry Night feel. I take out my heat gun and I dry the paper and get it nice and dry, because what I'm going to do next is run it through my die cutting machine with my Starry Night die. And so I tape this down and run it through the Big Shot. Poke out all of the die cut stars, again using my Tim Holtz paper piercer. And it looks pretty cool. I'm happy with the end result. What I'm going to do next is take out that piece of printer paper that I cut to the A2 size, and it's really thin so it doesn't add a lot of bulk to it, but I'm just going to use my squeezed lemonade oxide ink and just kind of mark up the top of it so that when you lay it behind the card panel you see a little bit of a yellow glow for the stars. And then I'm just adding a little bit more ink here and there until I get it how I like it. And then next I'm going to create the moon. And so I have a little circle die that I'm going to use for the moon, and I start with the base of the squeezed lemonade, and then I bring in my fossilized amber color, which is a little bit of a golden yellow, and I just kind of splotch that around randomly. I'm really not doing anything special. Throw my circle die on there and put that through the die cutter, and I have a cool little moon that I'm going to just touch up the edges with a little bit more of the dark yellow. And then I'm going to sprinkle water on this piece too, because that's going to give it a cool effect of like having some, light shadows across the moon. which are really subtle, but up close they're pretty cool. I don't know if you can see that, but there's white splotches on there. So there, we have the moon and the sky and the stars and the nighttime overlay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, as an afterthought, I decided to add a layer of very dark green grass as a added dimension to kind of ground the little critters that they were standing on something other than sky. So I have a lawn fawn green grass die cut that I used to make this piece of grass, and I'm just basically kind of playing with it to see where I want it. Add my little critters in, make sure that I'm happy with how it looks, and I'm ready to put everything all together. So lots of layers to this card, but again, because I used the printer paper, which is very thin, it doesn't add hardly any bulk at all. So I'm just putting those pieces on top. Then I'm going to tape down the grass layer, and I'm using my ATG tape gun, which I love dearly. It's a total workhorse for me in terms of my adhesive because it lasts for a really long time, and there's very little waste in terms of plastic waste and cartridges and things like that, so I just love it. So here I'm just adding the moon and making sure it's positioned great. And then what I realize here is that I can kind of see the blue peeking out a little bit behind the black front border. So I grab my paper trimmer and I'm just going to take off a teeny bit off every side of this card base, and that's just going to make sure that the blue doesn't peek through if I happen to not be exactly perfect aligning it when I tape it down. So I picked some purple cardstock that I thought matched nice with the background, and then I score it for a side folding card, and then I just start putting everything together. So I start by adding the base to the top of the card, and because there's so many layers, I don't use any foam tape. And then I'm going to put on the top layer of the black jungle vine background, and because there's a lot of intricate pieces, I'm going to grab my little glue gun, not glue gun, but my Lawn Fawn glue tube, and I'm just going to dot glue everywhere on the little fine pieces so that it doesn't get ripped up like when you pull the card out of the envelope or put the card back into the envelope. Everything is secured down nice and tight. So now I'm ready to add the little critters, and I'm going to use the same Lawn Fawn glue stick and just generously apply glue to the back of each one and stick them on there good. And using the glue helps because you have a little bit of wiggle room before it really sets, where you can kind of move things about like I just did. I kind of straightened up that little critter in the center, the fox, I guess. And so that's why I like using the glue, but the Lawn Fawn glue tube is my favorite. And then I'm adding the little rabbit. And making sure everything's in place. So now I'm going to start working on the sentiment. I have two that I picked because I wasn't sure which one I wanted to use. One says a Halloween hello, and the other one says which way to the candy. And so I just put them both on my Misty, and then I use my anti-static powder tool because I'm going to emboss it. Use my Versamark ink to ink them up. And I think I stamp them again. I always stamp twice with Versamark just to make sure there's a lot of ink to catch the embossing powder. And then I use my Brutus Monroe extra fine white, which is my favorite white, and dip that in a couple of times. I grab a paintbrush, a dry brush, and I gently whisk away the stray embossing powder pieces that kind of stuck to the paper where I don't want them to. and just make sure that's all nice and clean. And I use a Swiffer duster piece, and that is really good at catching all of the stray embossing powder and getting it off your work surface. And so once I did that, I used my heat gun to melt the embossing powder, and again used my Swiffer duster to wipe away the extra embossing, not the embossing powder, but the anesthetic powder off of the front of the sentiment, so that it was nice and clean. And then I used my paper trimmer to trim them down to size. In the end, I decided to use a Halloween hello for my sentiment, and I'm just going to cut a little flag. And some people do this with a die cut, and I just tend to eyeball it with my scissors. I've been always pretty happy with that. And decided where I want to put it, grab my glue gun or glue stick, line it up on the edge, and stick it down. Make sure it's straight, and there we go. Cute. Okay, so for the inside, I actually cut another piece of Nina Solar White 110-pound cardstock using the same rectangle wonky die cut so it matched the front, and then I taped that down on the inside. I didn't realize I was going to put a sentiment in there until the end, and I decided at the last minute to put a sentiment in. So normally I would have done that first, but I have a bigger MISTI, so I just popped that into my big MISTI, picked out my sentiment, lined it up, closed the door, and I use VersaFine Clair Nocturne pigment ink. That's my favorite ink for sentiments when I'm not going to emboss. Actually use it when I am embossing too, but it leaves a really crisp sentiment when you're not embossing, which is why it's my favorite. So once I did that, my card is complete. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to comment on this video so that you are eligible for the prize drawing at the end of the video hop. Thanks guys, we'll talk to you soon.